Santosh, thank you for joining. You started ZeerAI in January. Before that, you
That's right.
were COO at RB2B and retention.com. And before that, for example, you were president and COO at Apollo. Before
Mhm.
that, VP of strategy, growth and product at ZoomInfo. So definitely very strong track record in SaaS, go to market, but then also obviously in the data space particularly. So thank you for joining. I think the ZeerAI motto is kind of fix broken, the broken B2B go to market. Looks like you guys are pre-product, but any context you can
Yeah.
share on kind of what you're building and what the vision is here?
Sure, sure. So let me take a couple of minutes to kind of tell you why we started Zero AI and how we are solving this problem. So, having been in go-to-market for like 15, 20 years, it was very clear that go-to-market is completely broken. No ifs and buts, right? What worked earlier no longer works, right? Our sales math, you can't predictably connect outcomes with units of tasks anymore, right? You need disproportionate number of tasks to get the same outcome and increasingly getting worse, right? Pipeline is down for everyone. And so this is all from the sales perspective. But it turns out buyers are facing bigger and bigger problem because if you look at any G2 category, there used to be 5 vendors. It was easy for buyers to comprehend. Then there became 50. And where we are headed with AI, there's going to be 500 vendor in each category.
Yeah.
Like, how in the world can a buyer even comprehend and wrap their head around? So the search cost is increasing for the buyer and the seller. And where this is leading is, lots of inefficiency at top of the funnel.
Mhm.
So if you look at marketing channels for a moment, all the channels suck right now, right? All the emails are going to spam. Nobody picks up like phones from unrecognized numbers. Yes, people are talking about hacks and they're trying to trick the system, but how long before that becomes mainstream?
Yeah.
And then, right? LinkedIn email is wrecked. I was counting, I got 120 LinkedIn emails last week.
Wow.
Like there's no way I can, and most of them I don't even know what messages, but most of them were probably sales related.
Yeah.
So back to Zier AI. So we want to fix this or play a role because I feel personally responsible for breaking it, given my I played a role into
You
its
caused the
breach and
problem, now you're fixing it.
right, right. It was our, extreme automation, I think, that broke it in some ways, right? We got ahead of ourselves. So as I try to unpack the real problem, I find that it's top of the funnel where 50% of sales spend goes, where they're trying to establish kind of demand and need. And the same problem is with the buyers, right? So if a buyer has to talk to 20 vendors to decide which one to work with, seller has to send 10,000 emails to find the 10 buyers that are in market to buy. There's a lot of inefficiencies there, right? So we are working on agents, buyer
Hmm.
agents that will talk to sellers, allow sellers to pitch to an agent. It'll go ahead, look at vendors, schedule meetings, or if there are, seller agents out there, then talk to seller agents in real time, ask the same question, and then come back and with recommendations and scoring to schedule a call with humans, right? So we are not trying to replace humans. We are making these calls more productive. And then the same thing on the seller side, we are making seller agents. We do this using voice clones. So
Mm.
we think sellers are doing too many meetings that are not valuable. So we are allowing sellers to create their voice clones for specific purpose that they can send through their emails or not only top of the funnel but also lower in the funnel or to their customers that want 24 by 7 access, let's say, to their seller. So these voice clones are trained on content, and if they can't answer a question, it gets escalated in Slack, and then they could respond, and it trains itself. And so between the two, we think we will optimize go to market to a large extent, where if there's a call on seller's calendar or a buyer's calendar, they take it seriously. That's
Hmm.
like a real call where the likelihood of it closing is very, very, very high because we think the future of go-to-market is where buyers are going to self-serve a lot of the sales process
So
through research.
we'll dive. I think this is super fascinating. We'll dive more into kind of how AI and AI agents are going to change how people buy and how people sell. I have my next question, but just for people who are in here, Michael, Dan, Chris, Seema, I want to make this useful to you guys too. Obviously, I have my list of questions, but if you guys have a burning problem, a burning question, make sure to drop it into the chat at any point. I'll do my best to include it in the flow of the conversation if it makes sense. Otherwise, we'll have more Q&A section at the end. But I don't want this to be just a lecture of two people talking at each other. So you guys probably joined this event for some reason. So feel free to drop your very specific question for Santosh into the chat. Now, you talked about B2B go-to-market being broken, that the numbers don't work anymore. You're obviously in the trenches right now because you are in the midst of starting, building, launching your own company. It looks like you're very early stage. You started in January, but how are you thinking about how you go to market with ZeerAI? How do you build relationships, awareness, get customers? I'm assuming you're not spamming 10,000 people a month right now.
No.
So what are you doing to get your own startup off the ground?
Well, this is where I'm taking some of my experience at RB2B that turned out to be pretty effective. I think when you start a company these days, before you sell your product, before you even market your product, you have to seek attention. You have to create a tribe, right? So think about it. Last a decade or two, we have been talking about getting into attention economy. We really are there. And the way you seek attention, and there's so much of is through content in
Hmm.
social media, right? Which you talk about a lot. So that's something we have been doing. Very carefully craft your content strategy to kind of test different aspects of business. And then we are utilizing the messages we get to do product prioritization, right? To
Hmm.
even make decisions on whether we build these features or not. It may not be very evident to people, and I can talk about how we go about doing it. But to your question, how do we plan to market? I think it'll be very similar to what I did at RB2B. Lots of content, create a bigger and bigger growing tribe because no buyer wants to be interrupted anymore, right?
Mm.
So content is where they're raising their hand and saying, yes, I agree with your thesis. Now you have the right to pitch me, right? So we are going to see a combination of content strategy, community, and then PLG self-serve kind of go-to-market for ZeerAI.
So it looks like you're posting like twice a week on LinkedIn, something like that. I think you have
So it,
43,000 followers.
yeah, yeah, it's. I'm not necessarily very active.
Yeah.
Uh, I can ramp it up a little bit,
Yeah.
which I will as we get closer to a launch.
But is it purely like you're kind of posting, you're getting impressions, and then waiting for people to check out Zero AI and come inbound? I think you have a wait list on the website. Or do you do any active outreach based on people engaging with your content, stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So here's a playbook that I use. So anytime I need to talk to people, here's what I deploy. And I've had probably 200 to 300 conversations, maybe more during this journey to test different aspects of the business. So when we were launching, I wanted to test my thesis around buyers and sellers.
Hmm.
So here's what I did, and this is a playbook that everybody can follow. I wrote some content that, when you write a content and somebody likes it or comments on it,
Can we actually look at the exact post? Like, do you know how far back they are? I think it would be quite.
look at it from maybe January, February timeframe.
So that's what, 6 months ago, 2 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, five
Yeah,
months
so,
ago.
so maybe somewhere around here. If it's anything around like go to market is broken or those would be the content. Um,
Do any
so
of these like stand out to you? Any particular
yeah,
like?
yeah, totally.
Okay,
Yeah,
so go
so
for it. You were
so so then what I do, so actually you've gone too far back. So But yes, when you write a content and somebody engages with it, you've already given them some value,
Hmm.
right? So chances are within 24 hours, you have this halo effect, like a micro celebrity effect, right? Which goes away. They forget who you are within a few hours of benefiting from your content, right?
Hmm.
So, so what I tend to do is if they are in the ICP of first, I write a content that's carefully crafted to kind of evoke the right response from people who are facing similar pain or
Hmm.
appreciate a response to this pain. And then if they are in the ICP of people I want to talk to, I programmatically drop a line uh, in their like a direct message saying, "Hey, I'm building something, or are you interested in having a 15-minute, 20-minute chat?" And I
Hmm.
drop a calendar link, right? So it turns out that the response rate is really high, like
So
70%.
let's get very specific, like this post, for example, right? In the last 2 weeks, Ahmed and I spoke with 50 plus B2B executives about how they buy software, which is exactly kind of the problem space that you were kind of
Yeah,
building something in. They cumulatively signed 10 million in SaaS purchases in 2024, and there was one common complaint: buying tech is a huge pain. Here's 7 things about buyers that every salesperson needs to know.
this is perfect. So this is for a pain around buyers, right? So
Yep.
let's say I want to talk to tech buyers of say $100 million companies, like
Mm-hmm.
decision makers, like people that buy or are involved in making a decision, right? So if you go to likes and comments, I programmatically, let's say, scrape all this,
Uh-huh.
and then I scrub it for the right ICP that
Yep.
say I want to continue to have these conversations, right?
Yep.
And then I drop my calendar link and a one-liner message saying, "Hey, would you want to? I saw you like this content. Would you like to have a chat around this, or I can share more around what I'm building? Is that of interest?"
Yep.
So it fascinates me each time. Each time I drop this link, my calendar starts filling up. Boop, 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 boop. I see meetings being created on my calendar. The last time I did this, like around this post, actually,
Yeah.
I blocked 4 hours in my calendar for these meetings. I
Mm-hmm.
got booked for next 6 weeks. So,
So can you share what tool you use or how you automating this?
so this is there are different ways to do it. We just wrote our own script.
Yeah.
But there are tools like Phantom Busters, Captain Data, and their
Yeah, I'll
APIs.
drop a one that I know, Triggerfy, and then you
Yeah,
can that's something that collects signals. And then, for example, HeyReach
sure.
is one that can automate
Yeah,
outreach, or Limlist. There's a million of them,
yeah,
obviously.
there
Follow.
are many of those.
I'm assuming like I mean with Triggerfy you can I think already filter by ICP. You could also pull that into Clay and then kind of enrich with company info and then run a filter for
Right.
your ICP. Um, and then you said you send a connection request, and in that connection request you right away drop your meeting link, kind of like, hey,
No, yeah, most of the time I find that yeah, so if effectively a lot of the time these are people that may already be connected to me, but
yep,
I'm looking for a context to talk to them. I don't want to send them an outbound just because their title is right, right?
mm,
And that is what constitutes interruption, right? So I want the context, which is this content written on this, and the conversion is really, really high. Like I said, over 50% of the time they book a meeting. Now, if the meeting is too far out, I feel like it starts becoming a no-show. So
uh-huh, yeah.
it's really important to run this play within a few hours of the engagement, and then try and do the meeting in the next couple of weeks if possible.
Yeah, I think you just made a really interesting point. There's two things that happen when you reach out to people who engage with this post, or people who liked or commented on here. One is obviously there is a much higher chance that they'll recognize you because they just saw a post of yours. So you'll just naturally get a higher open rate, higher response rate because you probably ring a bell
Right.
with them. You're not completely cold. But then the other part is actually because they like this specific post, you know that you have some context around they're probably dealing with this, or this
Exactly.
probably resonates with them, or and you can reach out with a message relative to this post, about kind
Right.
of buying
So
purchases, etc.
one other recommendation. So when I get on a call, I try not to sell anything because that's again a turn off, right?
Yeah.
Because they are doing this call to get insights. They look at me as a thought leader, and if I go there and say buy my tool, that's betraying their trust in a way. So I try to focus on generating demand. I try to respond to their questions
Hmm.
rather than try and sell. That also helps me to have the reserve the right to reach out again if I
Yeah.
need to. So I do kind of soft selling and not direct selling. I let the sales reps kind of reach out saying, hey, you had a call with Santosh and I want to sell something. But I try not doing the selling myself.
Makes sense. And then so Dan McKinnon said in the comments, but you're starting from a point of 44,000 followers, better start than he has, for example. How would you speak to that,
Yeah,
let's say,
yeah.
objection?
So here's something that you'd find interesting. So I was one of the very early users of LinkedIn, probably signed up when LinkedIn started. But until like November of 23, I had only 5,000 follows. I
Hmm.
never really wrote. If you go back in my timeline, I barely wrote once in like a few months,
Yeah.
right? So when I was putting together the go-to-market plan for RB2B, it became clear that the way to kind of, demand these days are not generated linearly. It happens in bursts, right? And I wanted to create an org without hiring a whole army of like marketers and demand generation folks. So I realized that we have to sort of do this on LinkedIn. So I went from 5K to 40K in like 12 months. So the point is you can deliberately start this journey, right? So, branding in general was done by companies and branding teams in the past, right? But today it is happening through individuals and founders. So let me ask all of you, when was the last time you ever read anything from Microsoft or Google or Tesla or their company brand LinkedIn account? Do you remember anything you have read, right? Nobody cares what Google writes. Nobody cares. They can keep, you know, uh, posting messages, and yet there's an employee at Google that writes something that's in your network. You do pay attention, right? So we are in this attention economy. There's so much messages being bombarded to us, and yet there are few messages that we pay attention to, right? The role of marketing is to unravel, how to create that differentiation, how to be one of those few messages, right? And that comes from authenticities, trust. And these authenticity and trust has to be delivered at scale. You cannot do one-on-one conversation, right? Those days are gone. You have to use technology to scale it up. And that's where I think LinkedIn or this social engagement is so important.
Yeah. And I
Finn, if
would
you
say
don't mind, could
also,
I step in?
sorry, what? Say that again.
Could I step in for a moment?
Go for it.
So I have 2,500 followers, so I'm catching up on you, Santosh. Another couple of decades, I'm going to be right there with you. But I bring that up to say about a month and a half ago, I did something similar where I offered a meeting to anyone who wanted to talk about AI and products. And I actually got a friend of a follower of mine reached out, set a meeting. We've had multiple discussions, fascinating person, fascinating use case. And, I'm not sitting on top of 44,000 followers either. But, to answer the other Dan's sort of question and Chris's question, it seems to be effective if you have a true offer, your own reach isn't really the limiting factor. There's more to it, and it can accomplish more if you're willing to put yourself out there.
I would say there is for better or for worse, LinkedIn's algorithm is more and more interest based rather than follower based. So if you write a really good
Yeah,
post, you can have
right.
500 followers and it can still go viral. So, but I do want to come back to a follow-up question that Niv said here. I mean, you clearly figured out, and maybe some of that is, learning from Adam, some of it is figuring out your own things, but you clearly figured out how to write a LinkedIn post that does get attention and does get reach and does get engagement. What are those ingredients? If you had to coach someone through, they need to write their first LinkedIn post, they're a CEO of a company, they've never done this, they don't know what they should write about. Like how would you coach them? How should they think about what to write about and how?
Sure, sure. So you mentioned Adam. So Adam has a natural flair for this, which I don't. He's he's great at communication, and I had to deliberately create a persona, right? So I made lots of mistakes, as you can imagine. And here's, I think, what really works. So, authenticity to me is something our brains are wired to kind of detect, right? So if I just go on LinkedIn and look for viral posts and try to replicate in my timeline, I don't think that's authentic, and people can see it through it because that's not who I am. Because it's also jarring because they're dealing with multiple personas of me in that case, right? So it's really important to find out, look back into your work experience, and all of us have stories to share, right? Um, Figure out who your content pillars and your ICP and how it aligns to the experience and story you have, and then be consistent and start with a small tribe and really solve problems, right? Think about delivering value. And the what works for me is during the week when I'm having work related meetings or I'm reading content and I run into problems, work related problems, either mine or I see others having those problems. I have a notepad open where I jot down notes. And over the weekend, I spend 2, 3 hours kind of thinking through those problems, and I try to solve because I feel like from my experience, right? So I feel like if I'm facing and others are facing this problem, there may be a lot more, right? And any perspective could generate some interest. But that's my approach. It's the one thing I would highlight and emphasize is don't copy. You have a unique story, right? However early you may be on this journey, it only takes 12 months to kind of get to like build your own tribe, right? And don't confuse the tribe by injecting all kinds of content, right? That are sort of popular for other people. Write your own story.
Would you, so there's two kind of schools in some sense. One school is pick your ICP, reverse engineer what they care about, and then write about those problems, pain points. The other one is kind of just talk about what you're interested in, what you naturally gravitate towards, and then attract whatever audience you might attract, which might or might not be who you thought it would be. Where do you land? Do you think both work? Is there a better or worse approach?
I I made some mistakes, and I've learned one works better than other. So I'll give you an example. Given my background and given what I'm working on, I have a lot of strong opinion around AI and where AI is headed in general, right? So I started my career as an engineer. I tend to think like an engineer or a product person, even though I spent last 15 years, some of my best friends are in sales and marketing. Um, but given my audience has grown in go-to-market folks, anytime I write about AI or my perspective on product or engineering, I get zero engagement. So um, I deliberately sort of suppress my ideas around those topics. And so this is something Adam had told me. He said, because I do enjoy sharing my insights around AI, that's a hot topic. Except he said, look, is your goal just to like express, or is your goal, to like get some outcome out of this, right? It's like schedule meetings or create a growing tribe. And of course, I want business outcome.
Yeah.
So I stay away from just sharing but then on the other hand, I do share thoughts that come to me around us, my the persona or the audience that I have, which is around go to market.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's go through some question here in the audience because we got a couple. Chris asks, is reaching out to people who reacted to someone else's post effective?
I have never done that myself, but it's so funny. I get People are lazy. They don't even scrub me from my own posts sometimes. And I see my wife receive a lot of because she likes my post, and then I find that like I guess on one hand it is a low quality intent, because if somebody is engaged with the post, clearly they are interested in the topic. But I would say build your own tribe. Maybe utilize somebody else's post like one off, but don't make it a mainstream like every week. The real value is still in human to human communication, right? You use automation to cut through the noise, right? So when you get into a human to human communication using somebody else's post, you don't have much to talk about, right? Because then you are really doing a transactional selling, right? Versus when I get on a call, people have all kinds of questions around my post. Like, what were you thinking? Why did you say, and that makes for a more interesting, more in-depth, a better connection. And I get higher quality conversations out of it.
Well, it's also you're kind of starting out on a wrong foot, right? If you're Clary and you're scraping Gong's posts to then reach out to people
Right.
because they think they might be in market for your solution, it's kind of like they have the brand, they have the relationship, and you're kind of trying to squeeze yourself into it. So I don't know. Rushali asked, you spoke about personalizing the outreach message with a calling. How do you personalize it?
Can you repeat that again?
How do you personalize you mentioned that you personalize the outreach that you send to people who liked or commented on your post.
Oh,
How do you personalize it?
no,
Like, do
actually,
you
I
use
don't
AI or
personalize.
handwrite it or?
No, I don't personalize at all. So that's where I was confused.
Ah,
I don't know if
I don't think
said
you
that.
said it, but
Yeah, so I have a very standard like one-liner and a Calendly, like a calendar invite, because I want these calls to be inbound rather than outbound. I want people to set up these calls on my calendar rather
mm.
than me setting it up. Yeah, I don't personalize. The whole idea is that I've already given them value. I'm just asking for something in return.
Well, you customize it based on the post that you're scraping, right? So if you're sending it to people who maybe engage on the post about the buying process is broken, you might maybe reference that. While if you do some other
I
post,
honestly, I don't even do that. I just
oh,
say what my ask is, hey, I'm building something in this. Would you like to, get in touch or spend 15 minutes? I can share more. Something very generic.
there you
In
go.
fact, I use the same line in every time I need meetings or if somebody matches. Maybe
Yep.
I could personalize. I'll give it more thought. But
I mean,
so far, I
looks like
haven't.
it's working for you. So I guess one takeaway for people here is like don't overcomplicate it. If you had to ask yourself a bunch of questions to reflect on topics that you'd want to write about over the weekend, what would they be? So I guess the prompts on how to
Right.
extract what to write about.
I look for what evokes a response from me
Mm.
personally. So, and I do consume a lot of content, and I don't care if others have commented on the same topic, or I'm looking for, again, I want to reflect authenticity and trust through my posts. So it's important I don't want to write on something just because people want to hear or will engage if I don't relate to it, right? So um, I'm observing myself. If I get excited about some topic, or if I pay particular attention to what I'm thinking when I'm taking a shower or going on long walks, because those are the topics that are really important to me.
Yeah.
And in the end, I think it's the continuity in your content journey that's so important. We keep saying 40,000 followers, although that doesn't mean much, right? Because not all 40,000 will engage, and a lot of engagement comes from outside my followers, right? So ultimately, it comes down to, I mean, that's a metric or a reflection of some kind of growth, but ultimately, it comes down to um, you know, uh, sharing some unique insights. And we all have to come to, build our own process based on our journey and sharing what is unique. And trust me, there are a lot of people out there with millions of followers, right? Or hundreds of thousands. Adam has probably 120, 130K followers, right? That doesn't mean I don't write. If somebody has 10K followers or 5K or 2K, I think they should be writing as much as I do because there is always going to be a smaller tribe that really benefits from this
Yeah.
content.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier using LinkedIn. I mean, one is obviously you reach out to people, but you also mentioned that you're using it to validate certain ideas, to validate a point of view, to get feedback. Is that purely just how are you maybe using LinkedIn beyond just, oh, I want to get awareness to book meetings with prospects, to get customers for my company? Are there any more non-obvious ways that you're using LinkedIn?
So in the early days of Zier, I was doing like almost like a survey or market research. I spoke to about 150 buyers and sellers and asked similar questions from all of them to kind of do a more structured kind of research. I also I have been quietly injecting themes or messages in my LinkedIn posts to see, for lack of better words, I'll just call it message resonance score. It's more qualitative than I just skim through the comments or see how many people resist the idea that say there'll be agent to agent communication on top of the funnel, let's say, right? That's kind of a theme of what we are building. And how many sort of adapt to this idea? I feel like I have statistically significant number of folks in the audience, and very quickly I get a sense. And not only some people agree or disagree, they're willing to talk to me to kind of share more details, right? So I have been doing that throughout our product journey. Whenever there is during our internal team meetings, there's ambiguity on should we do this or that. Within a week, I get the answer
Yeah.
through this
I,
audience.
I think one thing that I want to highlight here is that like you're in the trenches and getting your hands dirty, because I think a lot of people who want to do this whatever LinkedIn thought leadership thing, I think oftentimes the assumption is I want to just put out some LinkedIn posts and then get inbound for my company and get customers. And I think you are getting proactive about reaching out to people. You're hopping on calls to get feedback about what you're building. If you have a hypothesis on what people might resonate with or where to take the product, you kind of write it up in a LinkedIn post, put it out there, see what's resonating, getting qualitative feedback. You're using it really as a growth engine rather than just, I want to publish content and get inbound leads.
Totally. I don't think that's I don't use LinkedIn as a very top of the funnel, just like throw something out and hope it generates awareness. I use it very calculative. So in the last 6 months, I've done 10 to 20 calls a week that came from LinkedIn for a
Yeah.
variety of reasons. Some for market research, some for product related, some I think they're going to be my future buyers once we build this tool, right? So I already have thousands of people in the wait list. And so it's really important. I think that is how businesses are going to be built when there's like hundreds of substitutes, right? Product is no longer, or technology is no longer a differentiator. It's going to be go to market, it's going to be community, it's going to be how you differentiate from others, right? And that trust and authenticity will, I think the difference will eventually come down to whether you call it founder-led marketing, but it doesn't have to be founder. It could be, multiple folks in the company that are non-founders, but they're all trying to sort of create a tribe. In fact, I would go so far as to say the future rep will be the influencer or the founder-led marketer, where once they move companies, they'll take all the customers from one company to another as an influencer, because all the products will look the same, right? Salesforce, they have spent hundreds of billions, let's say, building a CRM. They come up with a feature today. Within 2 weeks, all other CRMs have the same feature, and they take 6 months to build it, right? So we are getting into a point where there's going to be absolute product parity. So then how do you differentiate or buy from one company versus another? I think it's going to be these founder-led marketing.
How do you, so that's almost easier said than done. Some people say this brand or community distribution is the only mode. How do you think about every person only has 24 hours in the day? So if you want to get someone to read your content, participate in your community, pay attention to your company and what you have to say, you have to offer something. How do you think about brand, community, what it is, how to build it? Because I almost feel like it doesn't necessarily come natural to you, so you had to like really think this through a little bit.
So actually, it doesn't come. I mean, remember, I was an engineer doing a lot of coding, and it doesn't come natural to me.
Yeah.
Um, it's just that I have. So you are thinking, if I may, linearly, right? I
Hmm.
think this is a highly non-linear activity. So think about it this way. It is not the growth doesn't happen like steady, like a graph, right? It we live in a world where we are all connected, right? What that does is good ideas will get oversubscribed or overhyped, and bad ideas will get overpunished.
Hmm.
Now think about that for a moment, right? It's not that your LinkedIn growth will not happen linearly, like in 1 year you go from whatever 2K to 40K with 4K a month. You could go to 40K in like 1 month because you had one good post and then no engagement for 3 weeks or 6 weeks, right? And then another good post, you will have 200,000 impression, right? And that's just the world we live in. That's how
Winner
uh,
take all.
winner take all model, right? That's a great way to think about it. Because we are also connected, right? So if you see a good idea, we share with everyone, right? So there's no limit to how far it can grow. The goal should be in not in, I know a lot of people talk about consistency, right? I would say don't even be consistent. Don't write for 4 weeks, but write one post that, and then our brains are wired to think linearly. We think if one post didn't do well, the next post won't do well, right? That's not the case, right? It's winner take all. So keep putting in the effort, and one of these will, and then you start getting a hang of it. It's like playing soccer, right? The more you play, the better you become.
How would you? I mean, I talk to a lot of SaaS founders, and as you say, it's super crowded. For every category, there's 500 products, and they all kind of look the same. They feel the same, they smell the same. How would you coach a CEO or a founder through point of view differentiation? They're building yet another, sales engagement tool. Another Lemlist, another HeyReach, another Apollo. Cool. There's a million of them out there. How do you stand out? How do you develop that? How do you get there?
Yeah, yeah. So I actually look at this, and you're absolutely right. There's just tremendous noise, and it's only going to increase, right? I actually look at it as an opportunity because if you think about go to market, take a 40,000 feet view of go to market. Companies that could create that noise could sell more, right? Now we have reached a point where this noise is turning out to be people that can cut through that noise can sell more now, right? Not
Hmm.
create more noise. So, to your question, let's say I'm selling a sales engagement tool and there are hundreds of them out there. If I go online and I talk about how my tool is better, like data vendors are doing, my data is better quality, like that's such a silly, like they lack awareness to say that because nobody cares. Everybody's data quality is good enough, right? So I would, if I was selling a sales engagement tool, I would go out there and try to create a brand to really understand. Like first I would narrow down my value prop to one or two rather than 10, or like instead of saying I do everything, I'll say look, I do one or two things, or pick a vertical or pick a niche segment. And then I would talk about buyer problems, and I would go come up with some, like I would start doing office hours as a company. I would say, look, you have buyers have problem. We are going to open up every week for Thursdays 2 to 3. Anybody can come on, log into this Zoom, and you know what? We'll help you your RevOps problem either using our tool or somebody else's tool. Just make it easy. So what you're doing right there is you're cutting through the noise because nobody else has office hours. Nobody else is recommending or solving problems or giving you best practice or telling you to go work with a competitor, right? And I'm not doing this as a, I'm doing this because it really affects your business because now you're beginning to sound different, right? The whole goal is to be different, not to be better. And when you start talking about my enablement tool is better than others, you're just being the same as because others are doing the exact same. They're going on rooftop, creating the same noise. So any strategy that can create trust that's authentic is these days cutting through the noise. And in some ways, I feel like for the right marketer, the more noise there is, the easier it becomes to market if they know how to cut through the noise.
Chris, because you said you are in this situation, definitely write down if you have a follow-up question or if something wasn't clear, if you feel like we could go deeper on any part of it. Vrushali asked, can you almost always tell if a post is going to perform well? Do you have a personal checklist?
I have a sense. I've been wrong before, but like 80% of the time I can tell like it's a zinger or like while I'm writing I get excited and I now in the first few minutes, first 10 minutes, first 20 minutes of the post, you can definitely tell whether it's going to do well. But at this point, I try not to have that influence my writing because then I would just not write. Sometimes, so here's let me see how to articulate this right. Sometimes the posts that don't do well are more important than the posts that do well because think about it, right? So say I write a post that is that appeals to really senior decision makers. And by definition, there are fewer of them. So then on the surface, it looks like I have less likes and less comments. But then it turns out I have more high quality calls that come out of that post versus a post that appeals to everybody, but then nobody wants to talk to me, right? So it's important to kind of not get swayed just by impressions and likes and comments, but then look at like what are you really getting from that post. And
I think I saw a post by Tim Sulo, the CMO at Ahrefs today, who said they have an internal mantra, which is, I think something like get attention and talk about the product, which is really, really hard to do. It's relatively easy to get attention, posting memes, high level, generic stuff, fabricating some made up story about hiring some homeless person. I don't know. And it's easy to just talk about your product, but most people just don't care. But if you figure out how to get attention, but then also talk about your POV, your product, what you're solving, that's the magic.
I'm glad you highlighted that. That's so important. Yeah, all those memes and random posts that generate attention, I think that's a complete waste of time and it's like server CPU cycle. So I think everybody that writes on LinkedIn should really know what are they really looking for, and then try to some posts you just write because you want to, but then as marketers, I would encourage if you're a founder, try to get meetings out of that. Right? Try to benchmark how many meetings you got from each post or, number of posts. That's a far better way to measure success rather than likes and comments because a bulk of those likes are just waste of time because, and then you start getting into memes and so on, which like creates false positives.
Do you track any metrics at this point? Like, do you have a spreadsheet of anything that you pay attention to or look at?
I don't. I have a kind of a mental score, but at this point, I don't. I used to back in RB2B. Once we launch a product and get more formal with this, I certainly intend to keep track of meetings and so on.
What would you track? Meetings? Anything else? Would you track impressions, or what would be the numbers that you look at?
Impressions are definitely useful, but through automation, I would track how many ICPs of because people liking or commenting if they're nothing to do with my business or the intended message, then what's the point, right? It's just noise. So yeah, I would track of who really engaged. Also, what's interesting is sometimes people read my post and then they go to my profile and they don't comment, they don't like. And if I track that they visited my profile during the time, I can correlate it to the post because that's the trigger, right? So then there are lot more folks I get as a that's like first party data. I would keep track and then use that to kind of do outreach from time to time.
Yeah, one thing that a lot of people don't know about Sales Navigator is that you can actually see, you can build a custom list based on who visited your profile,
Right.
add your ICP data, and then you can, run some outreach based on that. Okay, I'm just looking at the questions. I think we mostly answered these. I had a question previously from Osman Lee, who I think you work with at Contact Out. He said, you're one of the OGs of the data vendor space, and that it would be good to get your insights on how pricing might change in SaaS and kind of your take on the future of pricing.
Yeah. No, that's when you look at industry, or at least I look at some big trends that cannot be debated, right? Some big tectonic shifts going on, right? And once you align your strategies to this tectonic shift, your go-to-market cost gets subsidized, right? And over time, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So you have a choice to either align or you fight against it, right? So the big shift that's going on, and that leads to your pricing question, is there's just going to be more vendors because with AI, it's just getting easier to build tools, right? So if there are more vendors, the number of the size of the SaaS market is not going to increase. The buyers are not going to just magically like double, right? Which means average revenue per SaaS vendor will drop, right? Or it will get distributed from 20 or 50 vendors to 500 or 300 vendors, right? So because now the cost of building a tool is just much easier, right? But also what you'll find is think about that trajectory we saw in the last 20 years. There was one CRM that everybody used like 20 years ago, right? Last I checked on G2, like a few weeks ago, there are 800 CRMs on G2 right now. Now, that's because a lot of those CRMs are for micro niches. And I predict within 5 years, there's going to be at least 3,000 CRM. So there'll be a CRM for a lawnmower, lawn mowing business, for
Yep.
instance, right? Which doesn't exist. Or so what that does is it has immense pricing pressure to say Salesforce or the larger CRMs because they can't just keep expecting people to pay. So back to the SaaS pricing or in general, I think there'll be tremendous pressure from premium vendors. So right now, the playbook is that in every category, there's one or two like premium vendors that charge a lot more. Like if you look at data category, ZoomInfo is that premium
Yeah.
vendor. Look at enablement, maybe Gong is that premium vendor, right? And they have the ability to charge a lot more than everyone else. There will be tremendous downward pressure towards, so they'll try to
Do you,
cope.
you think even to the premium one, the big brand, or just to everyone else? Like can Gong and Salesforce maintain if they maintain
I
brand?
don't think so. I
Huh.
think there'll be pricing pressure for them as well because their customers will face the same pressure, right? So there'll be a ripple effect where companies that were not willing to switch vendors now all of a sudden will be very willing to switch vendors. Meanwhile, the lower price vendors are also continuing to get better and better.
Right.
Right. So we will reach a point where so to deal with this pricing pressure, you'll see a lot of outcome-based pricing happen, right? And then this pricing pressure will also come from, so let's take the example of, say, ZoomInfo, since we mentioned, or say Salesforce, right? A lot of their subscription revenue comes from per seat,
Mhm.
right? With AI optimizing a lot of these, workflows, it's only natural that within 5 years you will have less than half the number of sales team that exists today. So imagine the impact it will have on ZoomInfo or Salesforce or other seat-based pricing revenues, right? To overcome with that, I expect these vendors to switch to outcome-based pricing so they can retain their revenues from seat-based, right? So outcome-based pricing will ensure that the companies will pay the same revenue to Salesforce just with half the seats, right? So but that will also so it's going to be an interesting dynamics, like, without going into too much. You'll see a lot more outcome-based, agent-based pricing, and a lot more SMBs and like smaller companies, and a lot more niche tools. A lot of folks that will leave these organizations will just go start a company, because literally there's going to be like SaaS photocopier apps. You just point it to one of these popular apps, and within 2 weeks you'll have a copy. You brand it, and within 4 weeks you have a company out there that compares with the best
Which
in
might,
terms of
which
product.
I mean, which if you're not, I mean, if you're Gong or ZoomInfo, this might sound scary, but overall, this might actually not be a bad trend. You might see just a lot more one or two or three people companies doing 500K, a million in ARR,
Totally.
and having a great life. And
Oh yeah. I think it's good for the world, by the way.
hmm,
There'll be far better customer service. There'll be far more innovation. And then, the role of software was not that you build one software that everybody uses. You need, like every business, a slightly different workflow. I think we'll see software that's customized to these workflows. And the other big trend is a lot of these softwares these companies will say, if it's so easy to build a tool, why pay like $1 million in SaaS subscription? We're just going to build it ourselves,
sure. Yeah.
right? And that's where you'll also see a rise of agencies that will host tools or build tools for these companies that these companies will own. So they'll have no, there's going to be a ton more agencies, a ton more micro niche SaaS tools at the expense of larger companies.
So last question, we have 2 minutes left. For your own company, are you bootstrapping? Are you raising money? And how are you thinking through the trade-off? Should you not, when, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are currently not fundraising. We are kind of trying to go through a certain stage, but we will fundraise
Hmm.
eventually. But we are trying to get as much as we can do without raising funds. As you know, the economics work much better. I do know, bootstrapping is an option for a lot of companies, but what we do want to do, I think bootstrapping will get difficult. We're trying to
Hmm.
essentially rewrite the entire playbook for go-to-market. We are kind of flipping the funnel. That will involve building a lot of tools, or replacing a lot of tools for not just optimizing the sales journey, but also the buyer's journey. There's literally no tool out there, no CRM for the buyers, right? And that's something we'll have to build. So yeah, there's a lot of building to do. I don't think we can do it with bootstrapping, but time will tell.
So you didn't drink the Adam Robinson Kool-Aid.
No, I buy a lot of that. In fact, I would recommend most companies to bootstrap. In fact, if I wasn't doing or didn't have such a big idea, I almost certainly would bootstrap if I could.
All right on the dot. Santosh, this was awesome. Niveda just said this was awesome. Thanks, Santosh. Thank you so much for your time. If you guys joined late, this will go out on our podcast next week. But yeah, all the best of luck, Santosh, to you and what you're building. I'm excited to follow along on LinkedIn. I'm sure I'm going to see all kinds of updates out there. But yeah, really appreciate your time. Rushali Thad said thanks, guys. Chris said thanks. Daniel said thanks, Santosh. So yeah, thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. I enjoyed this conversation. And for those of you listening, do hit me on LinkedIn. We'll love to continue the conversation.